Fit for an autopsy? Thy art. Loathe? Deftones. Periphery? Veil. Bad omens? Bring me. Not perfect comparisons, and it wasn't their goal to be identical, but close enough how you can see they scratch a similar itch. We, as consumers of media, are the ones who play the comparison game, and it's how we discover or find more of the art we're really into. So, is Imminence just turning into architects with violins? No! However, I'd be lying if I said they didn't do something to help fill the all our God-sized hole in my heart. Not entirely, but enough to get me thinking. There might be some who think this whole idea is a diss because they don't like architects, or some who think it's not necessary because both bands are clearly different. But when you experience something that reminds you of something else, your brain uses that as a reference point and then starts looking for as many similarities as it can. And that's what my brain has been doing with Imminence for a few years now. My favorite era of architects is Lost Forever to Holy Hell, with a little bit of Daybreaker sprinkled at the beginning, and right in the middle is All Our Gods. I haven't made a full albums list ranking or anything, but I wouldn't have any problem believing that that album ranks in the top 5 all time in the genre for me. Just so you understand what my reference point is here. With Imminence, I started on Erase and thought it was pretty good, but didn't really start getting interested until a couple years later. I sent this song to the group chat directly invoking architects, and at that point, my brain's off to the races. Now, a few years later, we have The Black, which in my case is another example of starting getting into something because it's similar to something else I already like, and ending appreciating it as its own unique work. There's some architects-isms that I think are pretty apparent, like Eddie and Sam Carter must have gone to the same school of vocal highs. That also applies to scream singing and the occasional clean melody. Like, it's impressive hearing how often Sam and Eddie can sound like one another's vocal doppelgangers at certain points, especially since some of the lyrics sound like they were ripped straight out of the same book A Match Made in Heaven came from. There's a couple songs in G sharp and F sharp, and that instantly clicks because those were the keys Tom Searle lived in for years. And there's obviously more strings in Imminence songs, but it does feel close to how architects used them in contexts like All Our Gods and then made them more prominent on For Those That Wish to Exist. But that's all supplemental, almost coincidental. The only reason why this comparison makes any sense in the first place is Henrik Oud. There's an unmistakable quality and style this man goes for in his mixes that follows him around everywhere. The way his drums are punchy but not overpowering, the guitar tonality at lower tunings, the vocal clarity amidst the chaos. This man is glue, and it's the main reason I hearken The Black to All Our Gods. It's the magic of this man's mix. And when you put those vocal, tuning, and layering similarities into that mix, you get why I hear architects in Imminence's music. And this is where those similarities die. Because Imminence, for as much as they fit the bill on modern metalcore, is still very much doing its own thing. It's symphonic, cinematic violin core that's a lot more accessible for the most part. And The Black is some of their best work in years. For the most part. It's well composed, well performed, sounds epic, and really tries to cut to the core of your being with every song. Like, it doesn't hold back in how dramatic it is. I also think it's the best Eddie's ever sounded. Like, he knows his range and what he can really push himself to do, but he also does plenty of lows and knows when to dial the intensity up or down. Like, he sounds great. The guitars on this one are an interesting component, though. I get the sense that I've heard these riffs before, or at least variations of them, and it's not like any of them are really going out of their way to grab my attention. They're perfectly serviceable. It's not like any of them are bad, so to speak, but it feels like they act more like a layer in handshake emoji with the strings than do anything to really stand out on their own. Especially when a lot of it is the same single string gent chugs that we've been hearing a lot of in the last 10 years. There's nothing wrong with that, it just means you don't go to a band like Imminence for insane ingenuity. We go to Polyphia for that now. There aren't memorable lead passages or solos on this thing. There's violin breaks and cinematic atmospherics. Like, they went the high fantasy route on this thing, not the metal guitarist's wet dream route. My gripes with the black are more in it just kind of feeling too grandiose for its own good. Every song is big, in your face, and trying to pull your heartstrings, and past a certain point, you kind of don't have any heartstrings left to tug on. 3 interludes on a 12-track album is fine, but they don't really do anything to lead into or out of their neighboring songs. They're just palate cleansers that feel weirdly detached from the rest of this project in some way. And as much as I do think Eddie crushes his lines, those lines kind of leave something to be desired. The lyrical concepts are riveting and they're really cool, but the word choice reads more like 16-year-old goth poetry Tumblr. Rage against the dying of the light, come hell or high water, there's no turning back. Some phrases have just been overused so often and now they've gotten a bit old, and if you put those into songs that sometimes have a pretty formulaic structure, you get songs that sound like they've been made before, which isn't great. Also, repeating the song title over and over again is super creative. I think the lyricism is probably the biggest knock I have against Imminence personally, but I also think there's a market for that. That particular style of writing, on top of the stirring and imposing instrumentation, is really catching for some people. It's almost like it takes the spirit of Melodeath, but puts it on a different canvas. It's cool, but I can see the elements that I'm just not really that much of a fan of. But all of that said, I think Imminence just keeps getting better with age, which is kind of exactly what you want to hear as a band. Being off a label is a really exciting time to get creative, and there's some really good stuff on the black. Continuum is a top track for me. It hits really hard and has a super drawn out chorus that I just keep coming back to over and over again. You should give this a listen if you haven't already. So, is Imminence just Architects? No. I answered that question 6 minutes ago. This is the end of the video.